Hello and good day to you. My name is Ada Sanja, and these are my fellow groupmates, Wong Jiang Ting James and Maram Yasser. Today we will be conducting an interview for ARC 5802, Practice and Architectural Management, under the guidance of AR Sharizal Yusman Yusuf. And our guest today is none other than AR Chan Mun Inn of EDI Architects. Thank you so much for sitting down with us today. We hope this interview will be beneficial for us students to learn more about professional architects' experience in the practical field, and we are looking forward to your input. Thank you so much.
Okay, so to start off, the first question for this interview is, what risks are architects currently facing on site in your experience?
What risks?
Yeah, what risks or issues that you feel like architects face on site?
Currently?
Yeah, currently.
Oh, architects face all sorts of risks. You can't say that there's no one risk. You've got contractual risk, you've got physical risk, you've got monetary risk. There's so many different things you have to juggle. Literally, there's no one risk that you can say, okay, it's going to be this. Contractual risk is that when you don't fulfill your contractual things that you're supposed to do for your client. You have the legal risk, because you as a professional architect, you have to provide certain level of professionalism. So that's already two risks that it's not even part of the construction yet. Then you've got on-site physical risks, things falling on your head, people throwing things at you, you fall down a hole, so all sorts of risks. So you can't really pinpoint one risk as it is. So I wouldn't be able to tell you what is that single most important risk. There's risk of losing data, your hard disk server crashing, the things that you work on for 2 weeks suddenly disappear on your server. There's so many risks. So literally you just have to juggle and make sure that everything's covered as much as you can. Just take precautions. I mean, ensure that most of the things that you do, you kind of like have a foresight of, make sure that you minimize this risk. There's no one risk that you can say cover everything. You just have to make sure you look ahead and just make sure that you don't fall in the hole.
Yeah. So, for example, what about disputes between the contractor and the architects, for example? Has that issue come across?
Very common, every day.
So how do you deal with that?
It depends on what kind of disputes. Whether it's the contractor not performing, the contractors are slow, not doing what they're supposed to do, or are we changing any documentations? Are we changing drawings? So where did this dispute come from? Because initially, generally there are three parties to a contract. You've got the contractor, you've got yourself as an architect, and then you have the client. You've got these three very generalized parties. So any of this party can cause this dispute. The contractor not performing, dispute. The architect not performing, not giving drawings fast enough, dispute. The owner or the client keeps changing their requirements in a way, dispute. So all these three parties, anybody can contribute to the dispute. So as the architect, you're generally the middle person. You're the guy that mediates everything. So of course, you will try to minimize the dispute that comes from you first. You make sure that, because that's under your control, you can control your things, so you make sure that you don't cause any dispute. That's the first step. Then after that, when there's the other two parties to deal with, you've got the contractor and you've got the owner, you have to also then start to mediate them. Make sure that if something happens to one party, you will have to be the mediator or the middle person to make sure that disputes are settled amicably, in the sense that you have to be fair. In the sense, who caused it? You have to justify to both parties and say, okay, look, this guy is slow, it's causing this guy's loss, or he's losing money, or he's losing time because of that. So what do? You have to sit down. So you're the middle person.
Okay, understand. So that's as an architect in the middle person. Do you have any issues like discrepancy on submitted design to authorities as the site as-built building? So the one that you submit is different from the as-built building. So maybe during the construction you have some site issues, you need to change the design, or the client requests to change the design or somehow like that. So what are your actions that you would resubmit the buildings or?
Yes. So again, very common because you cannot know what happens on site. There will be changes. So as long as you have in mind that you are whatever changes you do on site during that urgent times that you have to change it first before you inform the authorities. You just have to make sure that you change it according to the legal requirements that you know, that you don't suddenly just add another floor or extend it all the way. So you build it, change it, but immediately after that, resubmit as an amendment to the improvements. So that way you can cover all parties. And as I said, of course, the authorities will be very fair. Because as long as you inform them that okay, there are certain changes due to whatever reasons, you tell them that it has to be there, has to change, you inform them, it's fine. It's not like you try to be funny in the sense that you extend it beyond whatever's allowed. And that's you're causing the problem yourself. Then.
Yes, understand. So as long as you follow the guidelines that have been done, so you don't think it's a big risk that you are taking for this action?
Of course, it depends on what kind of jobs again. These changes, if you're talking about a private project or private home, it's easy because you're dealing with one single owner. But if you're talking about a development where you've got 500 units or 1,000 units, that single one change of one very small thing of changing one door is multiplied by 1,000. So then suddenly it's no longer you're dealing with one person's approvals or authorities, you're dealing with basically costs. Because one door, which you change one door, whatever it is, you can resubmit that, no problem. But you'll be causing one door times 1,000 costs. In which case then you have the other party of like the owner or the developer coming after you and saying, hey, what do you do that for?
Understand.
So you mentioned something about losing your hard disk or losing your work.
Yeah.
So when it comes to documentation relating to site instructions and site recording, how do you usually deal with that? Is there one specific system?
Site recording meaning?
Yeah, the documentation in general.
Cloud. Everything goes to cloud.
Oh, okay.
Everything is live on the cloud. Of course, there is a server in the office. I mean, all the offices we have, there is a server. But that server is immediately backed up to the clouds. So whatever it is, it's always online somewhere.
So, but before going to the clouds and all that, so you would take down minutes.
Oh, okay. Those are on-site matters. Yes, definitely. Minutes, minuted down, drawing, request for information. You send out for confirmation. Because every time you go to the site, there will be a lot of discussions. Everybody's talking everywhere. So there could be like 20 people saying 20 different things. All that has to be minuted down properly. So I think as an architect, eventually you'll be preparing the minutes of the meeting. You break it down into which trade, the architects, the landscape, the interior, the engineers and stuff. You break it down into point forms. Make note and make sure that all these are minuted down every minute. But these are just the official meetings. There will always be unofficial meetings on site where things are decided on the spot as well. So that you need to put down as a side note or some sort of record it down, so at least you know that 6 months down the road or 1 year down the road, you can look back and say, hey, it was decided there and then, who said this and that, so you can look back.
So these minutes would be confirmed by all parties once they're put down?
That's confirmed for the following meetings. So this minute for this minute of meetings for this meeting, during the next meeting, it will be run through again to make sure that everybody agrees on it and confirms. Yes.
Understand.
So, scenarios for you. What if instruction is given directly from client side to contractor without going through you, the architect? So, have you ever encountered any of this issue?
Yeah, it's unofficial. If the contractor or the client gives an instruction to the contractor, and if the contractor is not smart enough to record it down and send us a request for information, RFI, it's not official. Because from day one, from all our projects, we really tell our contractors that if you do any changes on site because the owner told you so, but it does not come with an architect's instruction, it's not valid. In other words, you will not be able to claim anything, you will not be able to do anything, we can tell you to demolish it as you want because it's not contractual. So if they want to make it contractual, if the owner comes in and tells them to do A, B, C, they immediately have to then send us a site memo or a request for information for us to confirm this A, B, C as an instruction. So no instruction, no go.
So you mean that they will need to do the RFI
Yes.
or memos as a documentation
Yes.
to ensure the liabilities of the instruction?
They also have to request for us to eventually send them an official instruction, an architect's instruction, because an architect's instruction is serial, meaning there's numbers. So every number and dated. So if this thing is changed, if it's not covered by an architect's instruction, it's not contractual, meaning they won't be able to claim whatever they've done. So it's on their own record.
Okay.
Okay, so do any of your projects involve a third party site agents or site managers?
Yes, quite a few. Clerk of Works or Inspector of Works, yes.
So are there any issues that you would face having a site agent?
Not really. The site agent is generally it's almost as though as they're our eyes and hands and whatever on site during construction. So they are actually our people engaged by us in a sense.
So it's usually engaged by you instead of the clients.
Actually, it's supposed to be engaged by the client, but I'm saying that what it does is that they work kind of like with us as our site. They don't work with the contractor. They are basically monitoring the site for us and our client. So they provide all the documentation in terms of photos, what happens on site, all the things that happen throughout the day. For example, if there's any immediate like landslides or problems or whatever, or crazy weather, it's all recorded down by him as well, and then it's informed to us. So we get two sides of information. We get the information from the contractors, and then it's confirmed by this site agent.
So do you think it's necessary for you to have site agent in all the project, or you prefer it just managing by your?
On our appointments for all our projects, we tell our clients that anything above $1 million, we encourage one of them to engage one. Encourage. It's not that we say that you must have, but we encourage them to have one. Anything more than $1 million, because then your projects are big enough. If your projects are just a small renovation or a small extension, there's no point for a site agent.
Okay, understand.
So are there any specific advantages or disadvantages that you notice from having a site manager as opposed to not having one for a specific project?
We can actually then immediately give a call to the site manager to help us to check certain things. Site dimensions, sizes, things are done certain ways, whatever. So they're there the whole period of time, rather than instead of architects or ourselves just have to go down to the site, do a quick measurement, whatever, just for a small matter. So there are certain things that we need to confirm so that somebody there for us to do it for us.
So it's more efficient for you to have the architects focusing on these.
Of course, there's also one person to literally record now every single day in terms of photographs, progress, whatever that happens on site. So, nowadays, our WhatsApp group, literally every day photos just keep coming in. I've got about 1 million photos in my phone now. So I don't even know what to do with it. So it's just there. So at least then, even when we're not on site, our site meetings could be like every week or 2 weeks once. On a daily basis, we get photos. We know what's happening on site.
So the documentation part will be great.
Yeah, it helps. Not so much documentation, it's monitoring. It helps to do monitoring.
Okay. Understand.
So in terms of procurement types, do you use a specific procurement type like design and build, for example? Or do you use other types of procurement?
Basically, we're a consultancy, so we rarely use design and build. We're architects as a consultant, so we'll just go by the standard PAM contract rather than design build. As a consultant, usually we wouldn't really recommend design and build, because the design and build is more of a it works on a platform of profiteering. It says that you are actually the contractor and you're also making money from the construction. So we try not to, because that way you're kind of compromising the conflict. It's kind of a conflict of interest, in a sense, because you're making money from the construction. If the construction or whatever makes a mistake, it's your money as well, so you don't want to be caught in that situation. So we want to be independent in the sense that if the contractor makes a mistake, I can immediately issue them a letter and say, hey, fix it.
So what about for fees collection for architectural projects? So do you use the one that are set, like the architects series
Yes.
of minimum fees.
Yes.
So you do follow it directly, everything.
We follow it in a sense that it's a scale of minimum fees. In a sense that we can actually increase it higher than the minimum fees. We don't have to follow it as exactly the percentage whatever claimed, as long as we don't go below the minimum fee. So that's why it's called a scale of minimum fee. We don't follow it 100% because our breakdown is slightly higher than what they allow for. But in the sense that we still follow it because we don't break it up, we don't contradict it, we don't go below the minimum fee.
Understand.
So do you feel like it's a good measurement of the fees that, it's a good guideline for you to
Yes.
set down your fees?
Yes, because it's a very simple look at the claim. If you look at the scale of minimum fees, there is that percentage of claims before construction and then during construction. And we normally say it's pre-contract and post-contract, and it's about 70% and 30%. So 30% of your fees are claimed during construction and 70% claimed before construction. And if you look at that, you as an architect, your role generally finishes in terms of all your drawings and documentation and design before the construction starts. So that's why the bulk of the fee recommended by the minimum fee is 70%. And then the 30%, when it's construction, you're generally there to monitor the construction. So in other words, you shouldn't be doing any more design. It's not so much that you shouldn't be doing any more drawing survey. You're just there to monitor the progress by the contractor. So most of your work are done before construction, right? So 70%. So that's why I think it's kind of fair. It's not fair when some developers or clients starts to bring this down. So before contract, some developers and some clients are now only paying about 50% or 40%. So that's the part that's not fair anymore, because your drawing is generally done by the time your construction starts. So all your work is done.
So is your project's workforce distribution usually based on the fees of the project, or is there any other way you determine the number of people handling a project?
We run on teams. We run on multiple teams to manage a project. So we've got teams of about 4 or 5 people in each stream. Each team is headed by a particular team leader. So what we do then is it's kind of like a little mini studio on its own, where this team will have its portfolio of certain projects. They might have like 3 or 4 or 5 projects within their team, depending on the scale of the size of the projects and their fees for that particular project. So if the project is big, they may only have 2 or 3 projects, in which case then the group. So in terms of how many people runs a project, actually it's very much of how many people in that team running how many projects. So it's kind of a balance. It's not one-to-one kind of project. So one person may be running 2 or 3 projects.
So would you combine multiple groups together, multiple teams together if the project is big enough, or would you?
If it's needed, but I think what we will try to do is we try to grow the team if the project gets bigger. So rather than we try to mix them up in terms of different teams, we kind of then eventually grow one particular team so that the team will just keep growing and growing. And then eventually, if it's big enough, that team will then split into 2 teams. So it's kind of managing a smaller group rather than managing a big group. So it's easier to manage a group of 5 or 10 rather than managing a group of 20. So that's how we run it.
Understand. So what is your opinion on technology like BIM or VR or these other current technologies that are showing up in our architectural field with assisting the architects with project management?
BIM is generally just a big name for Revit, ArchiCAD, or those kind of software things. So it's just integration in terms of where your drawing is immediately integrated and then sent out to engineers and literally the whole team of consultants. It only works if everybody's on BIM. So if you're running Revit and everything that you do, your drawings are all in Revit and everything's all modeled in 3D, and suddenly your engineer doesn't do that, it's kind of a waste. So it kind of hits a dead end. So it really works only when the group all does it. We unfortunately don't have that kind of team where our consultants don't really go all the way to have a full BIM documentation. So we kind of have half-half in the sense that some projects are done that way, some projects are not. But of course, we do also, if you look at it, we do a lot of private residential projects that doesn't really require heavy integration, heavy bin software scanning. So we kind of like I said, we balance it off. We don't really use it. VR is very new and not very. It's actually quite old, but in the sense that it's not a very well adopted thing in Malaysia. It's not very. I've got an Oculus Quest myself. I was playing around with SketchUp and Enscape. It does help to give you a sense of space and volume. When you go inside a particular model, it does feel like okay, you know how big it is. It does have that, but to set it up and then eventually to have your client sit down and put on their goggle and then spoil their makeup and their hair and then nobody does that. Eventually they're like, okay, no thank you, just look at the screen. So it's not something that, I mean, it's a gimmick, it feels nice to play with. In terms of design, yeah.
So it's impractical to have.
Not
it
very
as
practical. Not very practical yet.
Yeah. But would you encourage having BIM in the future? Like, would
If you
like
do,
to-
if you're running a multi-story, multi-$100 million project, you definitely have to. I mean, all the high rises in KL are running on BIM because the engineers do it. So as long as your whole team is on the same platform, yes, it works. It helps because then what happens is that your CAD drawings immediately get filled up with structural input, and immediately gets filled up with M&E input. So all the input comes into one single file, which is good. Only if the project is big enough. So that's how it is.
Understand. So for all these new technologies and software, do you think it should be aided by the government for you to use all these BIM, VRs and all that so that it can advance, or you think for all these costs that you spend on these new technologies and items that you need to bear it yourself, or you should charge it to the client instead? So which way do you think it would help this to grow?
First of all, I don't think you get any money from the government to buy you software. We won't be able to charge the client the software itself because it's not cheap. One seat could be like 20,000-30,000 per person usage kind of thing. So it's not cheap to invest in software. So I don't think you can charge that.
So the scale of minimum fees doesn't really include this part that you will get benefits if you.
I guess not. I guess not.
Maybe it should be an improvement for next time in the future. So
there is this thing where sometimes there's external services where what we call a BIM modeler, BIM specialist, where they come onto play for a particular project, and then they become the integrator for all the files. But like I said, we very seldom use it, so I can't say too much.
Understand.
So from your experience, are fresh grads, especially master graduate students, such as in our cases, for example, are they usually equipped with sufficient knowledge and experience to work independently on projects?
Maybe comparing to degree graduates? Or they are the same?
No, I wouldn't say. Okay, on my experience between the degree part 1 graduates, degree graduates, and the masters part 2 graduates, I find that the part 2 graduates are a bit more mature in the sense they're more ready to do something. The part 1 graduates or the degree graduates, for some reason, they're still very in their mind. They still feel like they want to do something, but they don't dare to go all the way. So in the sense that it's, I don't know, that's just my initial feedback on this. But I'm also not saying that part 1 graduates are not good. We have a lot of part 1 graduates who just continue on working and that's it. So it's just that the maturity in terms of thinking matures faster when it comes from masters. Of course, part 1 graduates will mature eventually when they're working in a real environment. So it kind of they start to take on the project, they start to mature there. I find that the masters, they have a certain maturity when it comes to it. But in terms of project management, in terms of design, I sometimes don't really see the difference. In the sense that I can't even tell sometimes when we get new staff, I can't tell whether they're part 1 or not. It's that kind of, 2 years. What can you do? Wait, you can't do much in 2 years actually.
Any suggestion or additional course that you would suggest for master student to take, or so that they can be a little more different than the Parts 1 graduates?
Actually, I mean, I've been talking to Big Guy. I've been teaching for the last 15 years in Canada. So we've been talking to all the other tutors and other lecturers and even other architects. In reality, to us, we find that, I mean, especially for those who practice as well as teach, we still think that school and education, you shouldn't focus too much on practice or management because it's different everywhere. I mean, you can learn all you want about the PAM minimum scale of fees and PAM contract. The moment you go back to Egypt, the contract is all useless because it's no longer the same. Same goes when I did my studies in Australia. We were studying Australian contract. I've never seen a contract ever since, so it's a bit of a wasted thing in a sense. But I find that in uni, you should be developing design and thinking and critical thinking more than you should, rather than project management, because you learn project management when you come out and when you do and when you're faced with the actual projects. Learning project management in theory is very theoretical and it's very dry and you won't be able to actually absorb much. So to us, I mean, to some of the other lecturers I spoke, it's just for the 5 years of education, architecture education, you should be focusing more on critical thinking, design development, and develop whatever you can think of in terms of design. Especially when you're doing masters, it should be more very research based in terms of design. So that should be the focus rather than project management. Unfortunately, I know this thing is about project management, but
Yes.
to me, you learn project management when you come up. When you're thrown on the side, you have to manage and you have to sink or swim kind of thing. And that's when you really learn.
So that's all the questions we have for today. We would like to thank you again very much for your time and your valuable input and information that we got from you. And we hopefully would sit down another time with you. So again, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.